The history of the region that would later become Ghana is rich with the stories of many peoples. Among these, the Akan-speaking groups hold a prominent place, their influence shaping the cultural and political landscape for centuries. Two such significant groups were the Bono and the Ashanti. The Bono people are widely regarded as having established one of the earliest, if not the very first, centralized Akan states. Their kingdom, often known as Bono-Mansu, was situated in what is now the Brong-Ahafo region of Ghana. This area, a transition zone between the dense forests to the south and the savanna to the north, provided a strategic location for both agriculture and trade, contributing significantly to their early prosperity and development as a notable power in the region. The Ashanti, or Asante, emerged somewhat later but rose to become a formidable force. They were a collection of Akan-speaking groups who initially inhabited the tropical forest region, roughly around the area of modern-day Kumasi. This dense forest environment, while challenging, also offered natural defenses and valuable resources. Over time, through astute leadership, military prowess and a strong sense of collective identity, the various Ashanti chiefdoms coalesced into a powerful confederacy. Their eventual capital, Kumasi, became the heart of a sprawling empire that would dominate a large portion of the Gold Coast, significantly impacting the lives of neighboring states, including the older Bono Kingdom, setting the stage for inevitable interactions and, ultimately, conflict. Understanding the relationship between these two Akan groups requires acknowledging their shared cultural heritage, while also recognizing their distinct historical trajectories. Both peoples spoke TWI, a Kwa language, and shared many customs, beliefs and social structures common to Akan societies. However, their political evolutions and economic priorities diverged, leading to competition. The Bono Kingdom had a long-established presence, its wealth built on gold mining and extensive trade networks that stretched far into the Sahel. The Ashanti, on the other hand, were a rising power, ambitious and eager to assert their dominance over these same resources and trade routes, which they saw as essential for their own growth and security. The geographical proximity and overlapping economic interests meant that interactions between the Bono and the Ashanti were frequent, ranging from peaceful trade to burgeoning rivalry. The Bono Kingdom's established roots and control over gold sources were naturally coveted by the expanding Ashanti. As the Ashanti grew in strength and unity, particularly under leaders who envisioned a greater Asante sphere of influence, the potential for a major confrontation with the established Bono power increased. This dynamic of an older, established kingdom and a younger, aggressively expanding one is a common theme in history, and in this West African context it was laden with profound consequences for both peoples involved. The Bono Kingdom, with its capital at Bono-Mansu, holds a special place in the annals of Akan history. It is often celebrated as the cradle of Akan civilization, a pioneer in state formation among Akan-speaking peoples. Oral traditions and archaeological findings suggest that Bono-Mansu was a flourishing urban center well before the major rise of other Akan states. Its establishment is dated by some scholars to as early as the 13th or 14th century, making it a significantly older political entity compared to the Ashanti. The Bono state's longevity and early development allowed it to establish sophisticated systems of governance, social organization, and crucially, economic enterprises that became the bedrock of its power and influence in the wider West African region. The primary strength of the Bono Kingdom lay in its control over rich gold deposits. The lands they occupied were abundant in this precious metal, and the Bono people developed advanced techniques for mining and processing it. Gold was not just a symbol of wealth and royal power, it was the principal commodity in a vast network of trans-Saharan trade. Bono-Mansu became a vital southern terminus for trade routes that connected the forest belt with major commercial centers in the Sahel, such as Jenny and Timbuktu. This trade brought not only material goods like textiles, salt and metalware into the Bono Kingdom but also cultural influences and new ideas, further enriching their society and solidifying their economic dominance for a considerable period. Beyond gold, the Bono engaged in other forms of economic activity. Agriculture was well developed, providing sustenance for its population and surplus for trade. They were also known for their skilled artisans, producing crafts, pottery, and textiles that were valued both locally and in distant markets. The societal structure of Bono-Mansu was organized under a king, the Bono-Hene, who was assisted by a council of elders and sub-chiefs representing various clans and towns within the kingdom. This political framework ensured stability and efficient administration, which were essential for managing the kingdom's resources and defending its interests against external threats. Their early success created a legacy of prosperity and cultural achievement. However, the very success and established nature of the Bono kingdom eventually made it a target. Its accumulated wealth, particularly its control over gold mines and established trade routes, became objects of desire for newer, more militaristic states emerging in the region. While the Bono had enjoyed a long period of relative prominence, the changing political dynamics in the Akan world, particularly the rise of the Ashanti, began to pose a significant challenge to their long-held position. The Bono kingdom's power was rooted in its economic strength and early organization, but it would soon face a formidable military power that sought to usurp its preeminence. The Ashanti, or Asante, people emerged as a distinct and powerful political entity in the Akan world during the latter part of the 17th century. Initially, they were a collection of disparate Akan matriclans and small chiefdoms located in the rich, gold-bearing forest region of what is now central Ghana. These groups shared common cultural traits and language but lacked unified political leadership. The impetus for their union came largely from external pressures, particularly the desire to free themselves from the domination of powerful neighboring states like Denkira, which exacted tribute and exerted considerable control over them. This shared aspiration for autonomy and security was a powerful catalyst for political consolidation among the Ashanti. The true forging of the Ashanti Union, or Confederacy, is traditionally attributed to the leadership of Osei Tutu I and his chief priest and advisor, Okomfo Anokie. Together they provided the military, political, and spiritual leadership necessary to unite the various Ashanti chiefdoms. A pivotal moment in this unification was the legendary arrival of the Golden Stool, or Sika Dwa Kofi, from the heavens, an event orchestrated by Okomfo Anokie. This stool was declared to be the soul of the Ashanti nation, embodying its unity, spirit, and survival. It became a profound symbol of collective identity and allegiance, transcending individual chiefdom loyalties and binding the Ashanti people together under a single sacred authority, which was vested in the Asantehene, the king of Asante. Militarily, the Ashanti quickly developed into a formidable force. They adopted and refined warfare tactics suitable for the forest environment, and their growing unity allowed them to field larger and more organized armies. The acquisition of firearms, obtained through trade with European merchants on the coast, significantly enhanced their military capabilities. This military strength was crucial, not only for achieving independence from Denkira, which they accomplished in the Battle of Fayazi around 1701, but also for their subsequent expansionist policies. The Ashanti state was inherently expansionist, driven by the need to secure resources, control trade routes, and ensure the security of its core territories by subduing potential rivals. The political structure of the Ashanti Confederacy was also a key to its strength. While the Asantehene, based in Kumasi, was the supreme ruler, the Confederacy operated as a union of semi-autonomous states, or Aman, that had sworn allegiance to the Golden Stool. This structure allowed for a degree of local governance while ensuring military and political cohesion under a central authority. The Asante Council, or Asante Manhiamu, composed of the paramount chiefs of the member states, advised the Asantehene and played a crucial role in decision-making. This combination of spiritual unity, military power, and effective political organization enabled the Ashanti to rapidly become the dominant power in the region, setting them on a collision course with older, established kingdoms like Bono. The primary seeds of conflict between the established Bono kingdom and the rising Ashanti Confederacy were deeply rooted in economic competition. Both states understood that control over the region's vast gold resources and the lucrative trade routes was paramount to their prosperity and power. The Bono had long benefited from their strategic location, which encompassed significant goldfields and key arteries of the trans-Saharan trade network. For generations, Bono-Mansu had served as a critical hub, channeling gold northward and receiving goods from across the desert. This long-standing economic dominance was a source of immense wealth and influence for the Bono rulers and their people. As the Ashanti Confederacy consolidated its power and expanded its territories, its leaders naturally sought to gain direct control over these same valuable resources. The Ashanti heartland itself was rich in gold, but access to the most productive mines and established trade routes became a strategic imperative. The idea of paying tolls or being reliant on Bono intermediaries was increasingly unpalatable to the ambitious Ashanti leadership. They envisioned an Asante-controlled economic sphere where wealth flowed directly into their coffers, fueling further expansion and solidifying their regional hegemony. This ambition directly challenged the existing economic order maintained by the Bono. The competition was not solely for gold but also for control over other valuable trade goods, such as cola nuts, which were highly prized in the Sahelian regions. The trade routes were conduits for a variety of commodities, and dominion over these networks meant the ability to tax trade, secure favorable terms, and deny resources to rivals. The Ashanti were keen to redirect the flow of trade to benefit Kumasi, their burgeoning capital, transforming it into the new paramount commercial center of the forest region. This inherently meant undermining the commercial importance of Bono-Mansu and other Bono trading towns, creating an unavoidable economic friction between the two powers. Furthermore, the desire for land itself, particularly land known to be rich in gold or agriculturally productive, played a role. As populations grew and the demand for resources increased, territorial disputes could easily arise or be manufactured. For the Ashanti, securing new territories also meant acquiring more manpower in the form of subjects who could contribute to the state's economy and military. The Bono lands, with their established infrastructure and resource base, represented a tempting prize for the expansionist Ashanti. Thus, the fundamental clash was over who would control the economic engine of the region, a struggle that made armed conflict increasingly probable as Ashanti power grew. Beyond the crucial economic drivers, political ambitions and the quest for regional dominance were significant factors leading to the Ashanti-Bono conflict. The Ashanti Confederacy, unified under the sacred symbol of the Golden Stool, and led by ambitious Asantehanes like Osei Tutu I, was not content to be merely one power among many. Its ideology was one of expansion and the assertion of Asante supremacy over neighboring Akan states and even beyond. The very existence of a strong, independent Bono kingdom, with its own long history of sovereignty and influence, really posed a challenge to this Ashanti vision of an overarching political order centered on Kumasi. The Bono kingdom represented an older Akan state model. Its rulers, the Bonohines, viewed themselves as legitimate sovereigns with an ancient claim to their territories and spheres of influence. They were unlikely to willingly submit to the authority of the newer Ashanti power. This created, a fundamental political incompatibility. For the Ashanti to achieve their goal of regional hegemony, established powers like Bono would either have to be absorbed into the Asante sphere as subordinate entities or be decisively defeated and dismantled. The political prestige associated with subduing such an ancient and respected kingdom as Bono would also have been considerable for the Ashanti, further solidifying their claim to paramountcy among the Akan states. The concept of sovereignty was therefore at the heart of the political dimension of the conflict. The Ashanti sought to extend their political control, demanding allegiance and tribute from surrounding peoples. The Bono, on the other hand, were determined to maintain their independence and protect their own political structures. Diplomatic overtures, if any, were made with genuine intent for peaceful coexistence on equal terms, likely founded on this intractable issue. The Ashanti demand was for submission or at least a recognition of their superior status, while the Bono would have insisted on their ancestral right to self-rule. Such divergent political aspirations rarely find peaceful resolution when one party possesses growing military might and an unyielding expansionist agenda. Moreover, the internal politics of the Ashanti Confederacy itself may have favored an aggressive stance towards Bono. Successful military campaigns and the acquisition of new territories and resources often served to enhance the authority of the Asantehene, reward loyal chiefs and warriors, and maintain the cohesion of the Union. A major victory against a prestigious kingdom like Bono would undoubtedly bolster the Asantehene's position and demonstrate the power and vitality of the Golden Stool. Thus, the political ambitions of the Ashanti leadership, intertwined with the spiritual and symbolic importance of their union, created a powerful impetus to confront and ultimately attempt to subjugate the Bono kingdom, leading to an inevitable clash of sovereignties. The path to open warfare between the Ashanti and the Bono was not an abrupt event but rather a gradual escalation of tensions fueled by the underlying economic and political rivalries. As the Ashanti Confederacy grew in strength and confidence throughout the late 17th and early 18th centuries, its interactions with the Bono Kingdom became increasingly strained. Minor disputes over trade, territorial boundaries, or the allegiance of smaller groups likely became more frequent and difficult to resolve. Each unresolved issue added to the growing sense of mistrust, pushing both sides closer to a major confrontation. Specific incidents often serve as the catalysts that transform long-simmering rivalries into open conflict. While detailed written accounts from the Bono side are scarce, Ashanti oral traditions recount Bono actions that were interpreted as disrespectful or as challenges to Ashanti authority. These included interference with Ashanti traders, refusal to pay alleged tributes, or alliances with groups hostile to Ashanti. The Bonohane at the time, Ameyaw Kwakye, sought to maintain Bono's independence. His resistance to Ashanti encroachment was a key factor in the escalating tensions. Diplomatic efforts ultimately failed to avert war. Envoys and messages were exchanged between Bono-Mansu and Kumasi, but disagreements over sovereignty and resources were too profound to be bridged by negotiation. The Ashanti, under Osei Tutu I, were operating from a position of growing strength and were unlikely to compromise on their objectives of expansion. The Bono, proud of their ancient heritage, would have been reluctant to concede their independence without a struggle. The failure of diplomacy set the stage for a military resolution. The decision to go to war would have been taken after careful consideration by the leadership of both states. For the Ashanti, the conquest of Bono was a necessary step in their grand strategy of consolidating power over gold-producing regions and securing their northern frontiers. The moment for attack would have been chosen based on their military readiness and any perceived weakness within the Bono kingdom. Once the decision was made, preparations for war commenced, marking the point of no return on the road to the Ashanti-Bono War, a conflict dated to around 1722 to 1723. When war finally erupted, likely in the early 1720s, the Ashanti military machine, honed by previous conflicts such as the war against Denkira, was a formidable instrument. Led by the Asantehene Osei Tutu I, the Ashanti forces were well organized, disciplined, and increasingly proficient in the use of firearms acquired through coastal trade. Their strategy would have focused on a decisive campaign aimed at crippling the Bono state's ability to resist and capturing its capital, Bono-Mansu. This would involve swift movements through the forest and savanna transition zones aiming to engage and defeat the Bono army in open battle, or lay siege to key fortified towns. The Bono forces under their king, likely Ameyaw Kwakye, would have fought fiercely to defend their homeland. They possessed their own military traditions and knowledge of the local terrain, which could have been used to their advantage. However, they faced a highly motivated and unified Ashanti army. Key engagements would have occurred at strategic locations, perhaps along major routes leading to Bono-Mansu or at river crossings. While specific details of every battle are not exhaustively documented, Ashanti traditions recount a determined Bono resistance, underscoring the significance of the campaign. The fighting was likely intense, with considerable losses on both sides as the Bono struggled to maintain their centuries-old independence. One of the crucial aspects of the Ashanti military success was its superior organization and logistical capabilities, which allowed it to sustain campaigns far from its core territories. The leadership structure, with the Asantehene at the apex commanding various divisional chiefs, Adikrofo, and their Asafo companies, ensured coordinated action. The use of a common language and a shared sense of purpose, embodied by the Golden Stool, fostered high morale among the Ashanti warriors. They were not just fighting for territory or wealth, but for the glory and spiritual integrity of the Ashanti nation, which provided a powerful psychological edge in the heat of battle. Ultimately, the military superiority of the Ashanti forces proved decisive. Despite valiant resistance, the Bono armies were unable to halt the Ashanti advance indefinitely. The campaigns likely involved a series of battles and sieges, gradually wearing down the Bono capacity to wage war. The strategic objective of capturing Bono-Mansu, the political and economic heart of the Bono kingdom, remained central to the Ashanti war effort. The fall of their capital would signify a catastrophic blow to Bono's sovereignty and morale, effectively signaling the end of their ability to resist Ashanti dominance in any meaningful way on the battlefield. The culmination of the Ashanti-Bono War was the capture and subsequent destruction of Bono-Mansu, the capital of the Bono kingdom. This event, likely occurring around 1723, marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Gold Coast. The fall of such an ancient and significant city sent shockwaves throughout the region, signifying the undeniable ascendancy of the Ashanti Confederacy. For the Bono people, it was a catastrophic defeat, leading to the loss of their sovereignty, the devastation of their central political and economic hub, and the dispersal of many of their people. The city, once a vibrant center of trade and culture, was reportedly sacked, its wealth plundered, and its structures largely razed by the victorious Ashanti forces. Following the military victory and the fall of Bono-Mansu, the Bono kingdom ceased to exist as an independent centralized political entity. Its territories were incorporated into the expanding Ashanti sphere of influence. Some Bono royals and citizens were captured and taken to Kumasi while others fled, seeking refuge in neighboring areas or attempting to regroup. The Asantehene Osei Tutu I, though some traditions suggest he died during or shortly after this campaign, and it was his successor who finalized the conquest, imposed Ashanti authority over the former Bono lands. Ashanti administrative structures were gradually extended, and the region was reorganized to serve the economic and political interests of the Asante state. The immediate aftermath also involved the systematic appropriation of Bono resources by the Ashanti. The rich goldfields that had been the bedrock of Bono prosperity now came under direct Ashanti control. Trade routes that had previously centered on Bono-Mansu were rerouted or managed to benefit Kumasi. Skilled artisans and craftsmen from Bono may have been relocated to the Ashanti capital, contributing their expertise to the burgeoning Asante economy and court. This transfer of wealth, resources, and skilled personnel further enriched the Ashanti Confederacy and accelerated its development as the preeminent power in the interior of the Gold Coast, directly at the expense of the vanquished Bono. The defeat had profound psychological and cultural consequences for the Bono people. The loss of their capital, their king, and their independence was a deeply traumatic experience. While the Bono identity and culture persisted, and Bono communities continued to exist, they did so under the shadow of Ashanti domination for a considerable period. Some Bono groups eventually re-established smaller chiefdoms, such as Tecuman, which became an important successor town, but the grandeur and overarching sovereignty of the old Bono-Mansu kingdom were irrevocably lost. The war fundamentally altered the balance of power, effectively ending one major chapter of Akan history and opening another dominated by Asante. The Ashanti-Bono War of the early 18th century had far-reaching and lasting consequences that significantly reshaped the political, economic, and social landscape of the Gold Coast. The most immediate and obvious legacy was the firm establishment of the Ashanti Confederacy as the dominant regional power. The defeat and incorporation of the ancient and wealthy Bono kingdom removed a major rival and provided the Ashanti with direct control over extensive gold resources and crucial northern trade routes. This victory was a critical step in the consolidation of the Asante Empire, which would continue to expand and exert its influence for the next 2 centuries, profoundly impacting all neighboring peoples and interactions with European powers on the coast. Economically, the shift in control over goldfields and trade networks from Bono to Ashanti hands had a major impact. Kumasi rapidly eclipsed Bono-Mansu as the principal inland emporium, attracting traders and wealth from across a wide area. The resources acquired from the former Bono territories fueled further Ashanti military campaigns and supported the elaborate state apparatus and court culture that developed in Kumasi. This economic restructuring had long-term effects on patterns of trade and development within the region, cementing Ashanti's role as the economic powerhouse of the interior. The Bono themselves, though diminished politically, continued to engage in trade and agriculture, but now often within the framework of the larger Asante economic system. Culturally, the conflict led to increased interaction and, in some areas, assimilation between Ashanti and Bono populations. While the Bono maintained their distinct cultural identity, the political dominance of Ashanti meant that Asante cultural practices, language dialects, Asante Twi, and political structures became more widespread. Some Bono traditions and knowledge may also have been integrated into Asante culture, particularly as skilled Bono artisans and individuals were incorporated into Asante society. The historical memory of the conflict, passed down through oral traditions on both sides, continued to shape identities and relationships between the groups for generations, sometimes fostering resentment, other times leading to complex forms of accommodation and shared heritage. Furthermore, The fall of Bono-Mansu served as a stark warning to other independent Akan states and surrounding polities about the military might and political ambitions of the Ashanti. It likely encouraged some smaller states to seek terms of alliance or submission to avoid a similar fate, while others may have formed coalitions to resist Ashanti expansion, though often unsuccessfully. The legacy of this war is therefore central to understanding the subsequent political history of Ghana. It marked a crucial phase in the process of state formation and empire building, demonstrating the dynamic and often brutal realities of power struggles that characterized this period of West African history before the full impact of European colonization.